Snowy powder drifting on wind and lights of colorful hues floating on the sky in the coldest nights. It was these sights that drew out Irmengard from her mortal shell and into the heavens of the icy north. She would gaze for hours at the lights in the sky and wonder where they came from. Were they tapestries painted by the gods? Were they the fiery trails of celestial bodies or beasts marking the sky? Or were they all just her imagination? The other Varangians surely saw them. Her brothers and sisters of the Cross and Hammer must surely have looked upon them since coming to Heathmoor. But did they care? It wasn't likely. Irmengard had always found fascination in the strangest things, but of course she was fine with this. The Varangian guard had arrived in Heathmoor almost a year ago now, and for some it was like a return home. According to older members of the company, the Varangians traced their roots back to this land. Their ancestors had traveled from here, and so now it was as if they were walking back into the mountains and ice treaded by their forefathers. Before this, they were soldiers in service of a mighty empire to the northeast, Byzantium. The Varangians were the elite shock troops of this empire, or so she'd heard, and she had joined after its collapse. With the collapse of this old empire, the Varangians became wandering mercenaries, fighting for coin. It wasn't always noble work, but it was easy work. Nothing could be simpler than the life of a mercenary. She remembered when she'd been recruited into the fold. She remembered being a young teenager looking for a home and a purpose. She remembered the one-eyed, gray-haired old fox who took her under his wing. She also remembered what he'd said to her when she'd asked what the Varangians do. "What we do," he croaked with a dry laugh. "We kill people, girl. That's what we do." "But why?" she had asked him. "Why do we kill people?" "For money, girl." "Well, I know that's not quite true, is it? Of course we do it for pay. We do it for the money because the truth is too terrible for us to openly admit." "The truth?" she'd asked. "Yes, the truth. The true reason we kill people. The real reason we take up axe and shield. The real reason we charge into certain death to spill blood. We do what those cowardly lords, nobles, and kings won't do. We spill blood and take heads for a simple and horrible reason that we can't face and still call ourselves human. So we take money for it, because it's easy. Money is convenient, an excuse, a mask to hide our true intentions and rationality." "Then why?" she had asked. "Keep fighting with us, girl, and you'll understand. There's no shortage of fools in this world willing to trade blood for money, but only a handful of true monsters like us." The grizzled old man was long dead now. Died many years ago, but his words still hung on in Irmengard's heart, and she recounted them now as she stared up at the skies. "All right, you dogs, get up!" The command went through the whole army. Every warrior stirred wordlessly and rose to their feet from their cots and tents. None spoke. None dared. In eerie silence, they rose up like the undead and began strapping on arms and armor. Irmengard did not need to join them. She'd never set aside her axe or shield. They were as much attached to her body as her own fingers. She'd been unable to sleep, too excited to slip into its embrace. "Hey, Irmengard! Sister, are you with us?" the voice called. She didn't know who called her name, but it didn't matter now. "Aye," she answered, taking her eyes from the sky and walking to join her brothers and sisters of war. This company of mercenaries marched away from the camp towards the battlefield. It was an ideal place for war. A vast snowy field, surrounded on one side by dense forests of snow-covered pines, and on the other it pressed into the mountain slope of a Valkenheim peak. The plan was simple. A supply detail of draconite was being transported through this valley to a Horkos fortress in the mire. The Varangians would ambush the Horkos warriors, put them to the sword, and fulfill their oath, for they believed that this draconite shipment was going directly to Oathbreaker Maddox. This was why they were here in Heathmoor. They had come to kill the Oathbreaker Maddox, the Highlander who had turned on his Jarl and left his fortress at the mercy of Horkos. They had agreed to help their newest recruit kill him, but not for money, which was further evidence of what that grizzled old man had said. "The enemy's before us!" came the shout. "Attack! Show them the fury of the Varangians!" The roar that followed was overwhelming with both passion and rage. The Varangians broke from cover and stormed down the hill to engage Horkos. The soldiers looked up in fright and had mere moments to draw weapons and prepare themselves before the battle was upon them. And Irmengard was at the front of the pack. Axe hand held high, she waded through the field of war with a howl of rage. Blades sank into flesh, shields rang with the gong of impacts. It was impossible to truly discern the technique of friend or foe. All was a mass of chaos and destruction. Blood spilt upon the ground and bones cracked, sending loud resounding notes through the cold mountain air. Teeth gnashed and the eyes of fire flashed in the morning mist. Irmengard found herself more than once surrounded by carnage, and in fighting so thick, it was like the world itself were lost to the bloodshed. After almost an hour of brutal combat, there was the loud sound of a horn. The combatants turned their attention to the mountain pass to see a sight most unwelcome. Horkos, it seemed, had not been unprepared. Ever the coward, Maddox had readied a contingency plan in the event that the Varangians attacked a supply train. Horkos had left a detachment of warriors hidden in the mountain pass, tailing the convoy. Now they had emerged, and thanks to the thickness of the battle, there was no easy way to escape for the Varangians. Not that escape even crossed their minds. Irmengard grit her teeth and roared with her brothers and sisters as the new enemy approached. Led by 3 warmongers at the front, with no less than 200 soldiers behind them, they dwarfed the Varangians, who now numbered around 100 strong at best. This was meant to be a mere skirmish, but it had turned into a rout. But the Varangians did not go down quietly. Taking up defensive positions, they tried to withstand the attack, but to no avail. Even ever warriors as fine as the Varangian guard cannot withstand the wrath of Horkos so easily. Blood splattered the grass, and the mist turned red. Irmengard was lost in the battle, and, without warning or preparation, she was struck hard on the head, her helmet falling away and her body crashing to the ground, drifting into the blackness of unconsciousness. "Sir," Irmengard had said. The snow outside was falling heavily, and the tent provided minor protection. The teenage Irmengard stood with fresh scars on her face and arms, and she watched the old grizzled man cleaning his axe in the corner. The old man grunted in response to show he was listening. She was used to that. She'd known him long enough to know that she was not being ignored. "I think I finally understand." "What do you understand, girl?" he asked. "Why we fight. The reason we go to battle." The old man's good eye turned to her with a look of consideration. "Do you now?" he asked. "And how did you come upon this revelation?" 3 days ago, during that bout with Edgar," she answered. "Holden had to break up that fight." "You ruthless girl," he answered with a chortle. "Forgive me." "Forgive? What is there to forgive? Edgar's a pig-headed fool and deserves the thrashing. Don't ever apologize for punishing the stupid for being so." Irmengard smiled despite herself. "As you say, sir." "Even so, you almost killed him. Do you think you went too far?" he asked. Irmengard paused a moment and thought. Did she go too far? Did she cross a line when fighting Edgar? He'd made her angry, that was for sure. But she barely remembered the insult. She'd merely jumped him without hesitation and hit him hard across the face. He'd returned with a punch of his own, and the two had been lost in a mad flurry of punches and kicks that shattered bones and tore skin. The fight had gone on for almost 10 minutes before Holden Cross himself, the newcomer and visitor to the Varangian, had come to split them up. Irmengard thought back to that fight, to what they'd done, and she shook her head. "No, sir. Going too far would have been if I'd drawn my weapon on him, and I never did." For the first time, and maybe the only time she could remember, the grizzled old man burst out laughing at this, howling with a laugh that took Irmengard by surprise. "Now that is a good answer." "True enough. You never drew your weapon. I suppose that means Edgar got off lucky." "Yes," she smiled. "And if it had come to weapons," he asked, "would you have killed Edgar?" the old man asked. Irmengard's jaw tightened. "If he drew his weapon, I would have butchered him where he stood." "He made you that angry, did he?" "No, not really." "Oh?" "If he draws his weapon on me, it's because he means to fight me seriously.
and I would do the same. And I won't lose to him."
Irmengard growled. The old man's smile brightened, and his eye glistened. "So you really understand, don't you?" he whispered, setting down his axe and looking at Irmengard in the face, his smile bright and his one eye looking deep into hers. "So, why do we fight, girl? It's not for the money, is it?" A slight glint in his eye, Irmengard shook her head slowly.
"No, sir."
"Wake up, you cow!" She was pulled from her memory for the second time that day. She was disappointed about that. She wanted to see the old man again. She rose, her head throbbing. Her weapons were gone. Her helmet was off. Her hands were bound behind her back. Standing before her were the remains of the battlefield. The supply caravan stood in the distance, unmoving but still intact. In front of her were around 40 to 50 Horko soldiers, and on their knees, around her, were 8 other Varangians, the only survivors of her company. So this was defeat. She'd never tasted it before. Well, no, that wasn't true. She tasted it once before, when her own village was raided and destroyed by elements of the Arabian forces from where the Ephira hailed. She was no native to Valkenheim or Heathmoor. She knew little of the ways of this place. All she knew was that this was where she was meant to battle, where she was meant to war, and so she had. But now she was tasting defeat a second time in her life, and the taste was disgusting. From the contingent of Horko soldiers came 3 warmongers, and Irmengard recognized them: Heldra, Demona, and Rake. The Sorora Fatum, the Fate Sisters. 3 warmonger sisters of Horkos who served as executioners and commanders under Astria. So the Sorora Fatum had been sent to deal with the Varangian company. That somehow made Irmengard flattered. Heldra, the first sister, stepped forward and stared at the survivors.
"The battle is over, Varangians. It was a well-fought battle, and you killed far more of us than we anticipated, but even you must see this fight is done."
Rake spoke next.
"You need not die needlessly, though. You have a choice, a chance to choose your fate."
The Varangians all looked up at the sisters curiously.
"You fight for coin? Then have it. Astria is more than willing to pay you to fight by our side, to join the Order of Horkos and take the fight to Chimera." To demonstrate this, she held out an enormous bag of what was unmistakably gold and tossed it at the 8 Varangians. Aztec coins spilt out before the soldiers. "Surely you must know that we at Horkos far exceed those of Chimera. To fight with Chimera is folly, as you now realize. Earn some money and fight with the winning side."
Then Demona stepped forward.
"Or perhaps you just wish to go home. Then you are free to leave. But before you leave, you will tell us the location of the rest of the Varangian forces. We know this is not all of you, merely a company. So tell us where the rest of your ilk hide. Do this, and we will trade this information for your lives."
The Varangians all exchanged looks, and Irmengard never took her eyes off the warmongers. Heldra noticed and approached her.
"Or perhaps you foolishly wish to go on fighting, to fight in vain against the impossible."
"Sister," one of the Varangians whispered. She glanced at him. It was Edgar. He still had that massive scar over his left eye from their brawl. How ironic that he would be here with her at the end. She nodded at him, and he returned it. She glared back at Heldra.
"Give me a weapon, and I will fight you."
"Why?" Heldra asked.
"Why would we agree to fight you and risk our own necks, when it's just easier to execute you?"
On cue, a raider from the group stepped forward, and he was holding her axe. Irmengard recognized her own axe in the hands of the brute.
"Take her head."
"With pleasure." The raider approached her and stood behind her to plunge the axe into her skull.
"You made a foolish choice, Varangian," Demona sighed. "The only fool here is you, bitches of Horkos," Irmengard hissed. "Like Maddox, you thought we could be bought for coin, but you have no idea why we fight. The reason Varangians draw blood."
The raider swung down with his axe.
Irmengard let out a roar and yanked her body to the side fast. With a scream of pain and rage, she felt the axe head bite into her left hand and cleave through her pinky finger. She screamed and howled, but along with the finger went the rope. Had it not been for the rope, she might have lost her whole hand, but in exchange for that one meaningless finger, her binds fell away. The raider, stunned by her sudden move, was not prepared when she rolled and kicked his ankle, sending him falling to the ground. Her right hand snatched up her weapon and swung it in a backhanded strike into the raider's teeth, cleaving his jaw. She howled in fury, and Horko, so stunned by her savage retaliation, took too long to respond, and she brought the axe head down on the binds of Edgar. "Kill her!" Heldra bellowed, but Edgar was now up. He grabbed up the raider's own fallen axe and used it to chop down the closest conqueror who had rushed to slay him. "Free our kin!" As she gave the order, Irmengard charged at the sisters, who had all drawn their weapons to fight back. Irmengard knew that she would die in this fight. They all would. Her, Edgar, the other 7, they would die. Taking the money or just returning home would have been the easiest, but the Varangian guards don't fight for money or for peace. They have another reason for fighting. And the voice of the old man spoke once more in her mind. "Because we enjoy it." The grizzled old man smiled at her when she answered. Irmengard couldn't fight the small smile spreading across her face. Oh yes, she enjoyed it. She loved it. The sensation of blood splattering the ground, the thrill of a blade cutting flesh, even if it was her own, the pounding of her heart as she blocked a wild strike, and the sweat on her neck as she tasted the passion in her body and her foes. No joy could compare to it. No excitement came close. Not drink, not food, not sex. The absolute thrill of battle was her narcotic, her lifeblood, her every breath. That was why Varangians fought, because every Varangian lives for the battle. Money is just the excuse. It's the veil to mask this dark and demented fetish. It's a truth that few men or women would dare to admit to anyone, let alone themselves, that they love to fight, to kill or be killed. And yet, there would be no truth more real to her. That's why she would never accept Horkos' offer. Why she could never join Horkos and defeat the weaker Chimera. Because that would end the war too quickly. The fight wouldn't satisfy. To truly enjoy a fight, you must fight an opponent who is either at your level or stronger. Because only then can you experience true passion. That's why Varangian will never break their word or flee from a battle. Because why would they run away from the very thing they crave? If they are to die for that beloved high, then at the very least they will die in ecstasy. The Sisters of Fate were forced on the defensive as this mad woman charged them all at once with a bloody hand and a wild axe in hand, and a look of absolute joy in her eyes. Maddox was listening to the report from Rake, his face sweating, his eyes wide with fear, and his mouth very dry. As Rake spoke, nursing her bleeding stump of a left arm, reporting to Maddox of the horrors of that battle, Maddox had to stop himself from jumping out of his chair in disbelief. 2 of the Sisters of Fate were dead. Only Rake remained, killed by only one mad Varangian woman, who smiled with delight as she hacked them to pieces. She shrugged off blows and stabs that should have felled her, and only roared with glee as she butchered them one by one. "Surely she died," Maddox demanded. "Tell me that woman is dead," Maddox demanded. "I am unsure," she answered. She was able to free her allies, and those 8 Varangians. They fought all 40 of us, with the same intensity as that woman. I only saw 3 die before I had to retreat."
"And the supply caravan?"
Maddox asked. "We had to abandon it. It is likely stolen and absconded." Maddox snarled like an angry bear and walked to the window to look out at the world beyond. These Varangians. Who the hell were they? They could not be bought. They could not be stopped. They had chased him from his stronghold, and every time they appeared, every victory over them cost him dearly, and now there was one among them, a woman, who laughed and screamed excitedly even as her own blood stained the grass. What could anyone say of such a woman other than to call her a monster? Why do they fight? What drives these beasts?
"It's as if they take perverse pleasure in death," Maddox snarled. "If that's true, then surely this land is a paradise for these monsters.
That woman, Irmengard, I believe that was her name. I fear she may not be dead.
If she yet lives, we have much to fear from a killer like her. A killer who has no fear of death, and would even run to it like a lover.